Who's picking?
Je pose la question en français à David par rapport à... Moi, je me pose la question de l'interaction entre le musicien et le rossignol, à savoir, est-ce qu'il est capable, est-ce qu'il est possible de faire preuve ou d'assurer que le rossignol écoute également le musicien, ou est-ce que dans ce cas-là, la musique ne se sert que du chant du rossignol comme d'un fond sonore? On pourrait faire ça n'importe où. Donc est-ce qu'on peut mesurer cette interaction? Est-ce qu'il y a une interaction? Est-ce qu'on peut la mesurer?
I think they definitely hear what we're doing. What they actually do, how much they respond to sounds that are not made by other nightingales, or less sure about that. But actually in Berlin is the place where the most scientists study nightingale song and their interaction. So they know quite a lot. We know quite a lot about how they behave with sound. And there's basically three different ways they respond to sounds. When they're just establishing their territories, they tend to interrupt. They'll sing at the same time as other birds do. And then when the territories are established after a few weeks, one will sing and then wait. They sing back and forth. And that's seen as a more peaceful sense, like this is my place, this is my place. And then there's a third kind of bird that is one convinced of his own superiority, pays no attention to anyone else, just sings. You know, like, oh, is there someone else here? Oh, I didn't notice my song is so wonderful. And there's several scientific papers that talk about this. And I mean, you can easily run into those three kinds of jazz musicians if you're playing. It's like in the human world, it's so funny that it's so much like people. So that's one thing we know about them. We also, another study demonstrates that the one kind of, I don't know how to describe the sound exactly, it's kind of bluesy, kind of noisy sound where they go boop, 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 boop. This kind of sound is considered the sexiest sounds. The females really like that one. And one paper by some Berlin scientists say, why doesn't the male just do that over and over again? If it's so cool. But of course, if you're thinking musically, you can't use your good effects all the time. You have to have the right proportion when you use those sounds. And I think if scientists musically analyzed the nightingale song, they would notice a certain proportion in which the very cool sounds are used would be similar to the use of those sounds in human music. And one thing I've tried to do is get scientists to take music seriously as a tool in analyzing animal communication, instead of just saying that's just human ideas and we are objective and musicians, are less objective. And I've had some success in convincing a few scientists to try this out. But how do they respond to human music? I think I would say the actual musical interaction is more sophisticated than that model I gave you. They're really interested in other sounds. They play around with them. And they also know they're going to win. No matter how many hours we stay out there, it's not as long as they're going to sing. We're going to go away and they're going to keep going. And so, but I think they enjoy sound. And you can't make them stop. You could play an electric guitar really loud next to one. He's going to keep singing. He's not going to fly away. They take it on either as a challenge or something fun. I'm not sure, but they definitely. Some of them really like to be next to loud circuses and fairs and amusement parks, which is noise. They just want to be there and they won't go away. They're not scared by noise. They kind of put up with it or enjoy it, kind of join in. Yeah.
J'en ai une question pour tous deux, mais pour commencer, just a quick question for you, David. So just to pick up on this one, obviously you're a clarinetist, but did you find other voices or instruments that resonate more or less or better?
Different
or
kinds of things. We have one musician who's sampling the birds, and remixing them on an iPad, And that kind of gets them interested, but I think they're also interested in other sounds. I think they like noisy sounds like trains, and I think they also respond to parts of the sounds that overlap with what they do. Because they have clicks, whistles, and buzz sounds, And and boo, 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 and then the three kinds of sounds. They're interested in those sounds in particular, things that seem to go close to that. I would say sometimes I notice them actually change what they're doing because of us, because they tend to, go boo, 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 and then someone sings a whistle that has a different direction, like ooh, and then they start to try doing things like that, like they're interested. But I think by now we have enough recordings to actually have data that someone could analyze it in a statistical way by just doing what scientists do with sound recordings and statistically analyze what's going on and come out with some evidence. So maybe we'll try that next. So, you had your other question for this guy.
If you don't mind. So a question of consent for both of you. One of the things that I love about these projects is that we're trying to understand our relationships with animals, and that animals want to relate with us, obviously, right? They're curious beings. They want to play with us as well. But there's this issue of how we think about just, I don't know. It's a very general and broad question, but the question of consent. So whether it's the playing of instruments or music with them, maybe it doesn't matter. But it could very well be, let's just, for argument's sake, be that the music, they don't like it, right? Well, or with the frogs, which I love this story, by the way. It was big news in Canada. It's interesting to hear that you're in part behind it. Just with the artistic practice. General, thoughts.
According to the scientists in Berlin, it's illegal to play music with them. They say it's illegal and only they have permission because they have the permits to do research. But I say, look, the birds live in these parks, there's music going on all the time. What are you talking about? This is just like what's going on here. If you are studying these birds, you're studying birds in a human environment. This is nothing pure about this population. They particularly don't like it if you play them their own songs back. They think that's really bad because that's sort of messing with the birds. They're probably right. It probably is against the law, but I don't think it's such a bad thing to do. If it was really bothering them, I'd stop. I don't do it as there's noise from boats and trains and airplanes all the time. I'm just playing a little bit of music. I'm not too worried about harming them. But with the frogs,
J'aurais beaucoup de choses à dire sur la notion de consentement sur les projets artistiques qui travaillent sur les animaux, puisque je suis en train d'écrire un article à ce sujet-là avec des collègues philosophes, parce qu'habituellement je travaille avec des bactéries, non pas avec des animaux. Et la question c'est jusqu'où on peut descendre dans la phylogénie pour dire qu'une espèce avec qui on collabore ou qu'on maltraite ou qu'on utilise peut nous donner un consentement. Et en particulier, ces notions-là qui sont les notions de consentement, les notions de douleur, les notions d'empathie, sont des notions humaines qu'on essaie de transposer à d'autres organismes qui peuvent peut-être fonctionner chez des ours, chez des mammifères, peut-être chez des vertébrés, mais dès lors qu'on arrive chez des plantes, qu'on arrive chez des champignons, qu'on arrive chez des bactéries, cette notion d'empathie-là ne fonctionne pas parce qu'on n'a pas de neurones miroirs qui nous permettent de comprendre. Les récepteurs de douleur n'existent pas chez la plupart de ces organismes-là. Et d'ailleurs, eux ne nous demandent pas de consentement avant de nous infecter. Donc, c'est des questions qu'on peut soit regarder d'un point de vue moral et statutaire en disant chaque espèce a des droits, et on doit les respecter. Nous, on l'aborde plutôt d'un point de vue d'éthique environnementale, du fait que dans le réseau du vivant, et c'est là qu'il est intéressant de voir qu'on peut le regarder d'en haut, d'en bas, donc le shallow level ecology ou le deep level ecology. La façon shallow de voir les choses, c'est que en dérangeant et en modifiant le vivant, c'est nous qui allons payer le prix éventuellement. Donc c'est très, encore une fois, anthropocentré. Ou on peut utiliser une approche qui est très deep en disant l'homme fait partie de l'écosystème et n'est pas plus important que n'importe quel des nœuds de cet écosystème-là. Et à ce moment-là, les gestes que nous posons, des fois, vont aller au détriment des intérêts humains, comme c'est le cas, le débat qu'on a avec la rainette, ça peut aller au détriment des intérêts économiques de l'humain pour protéger une espèce. Nous, on prend plutôt une approche qui est intermédiaire, qu'on appelle du deep shallow ethics, qui est basé sur le fait que, et ça revient à nos bactéries et ce que je disais du début, dès lors qu'on reconnaît que tous les organismes multicellulaires sont des holobiontes qui ont aussi des bactéries à l'intérieur d'eux-mêmes, tenir compte des bactéries, c'est aussi bon pour nous. Donc, on ne parle plus simplement ici des espèces, on parle finalement de tenir compte des communautés. Nous sommes des communautés d'organismes. Et dès lors, ça remet en question ces notions de consentement, ces notions d'empathie, ces notions de douleur, dans une autre dynamique qui est la notion de risque. C'est quoi le risque qu'on prend quand on intervient et qui risque de complètement chambouler l'écologie et l'environnement. Donc, on peut arriver aux mêmes conclusions, mais pas sur les mêmes, sur les mêmes variables qu'on va utiliser. Donc, on pourrait dire, je ne veux pas maltraiter les bactéries, non pas pour des raisons de consentement, mais pour des raisons, les risques pour la santé humaine ou pour la planète sont beaucoup plus graves. Et dès lors qu'on change cette grille d'analyse-là, bien, on arrive avec une façon qui est souvent beaucoup plus carrée et scientifique d'analyser les choses, plutôt que d'essayer de projeter nos propres valeurs sur des organismes qui sont incommensurables à ce que nous sommes. Donc, c'est pour ça que je pourrais en dire beaucoup, parce qu'on réfléchit à ça depuis 1 an.
Merci.
So, do you think it's basically a good for humans to back off a little bit? So you have a development project, it can be this big, so there are these tiny frogs that no one knows about, and some people don't want to scale back their project because of this frog. But is it basically a good to back off a little bit just because we're usually overextending ourselves? Is that an argument that someone could use?
Ça dépend de quel côté on le regarde. Et on peut en fait regarder ces arguments-là comme une espèce de tableau de contingence qu'on appelle en statistique les erreurs de type 1 et les erreurs de type 2. Les erreurs de type 1, c'est qu'est-ce qu'on a à perdre si on pose ce geste-là. Les erreurs de type 2, c'est qu'est-ce qu'on a à gagner si on ne pose pas ce geste-là. Et donc, on a naturellement les 4 cases. Qu'est-ce qu'on a à perdre si on le fait? Qu'est-ce qu'on a à perdre si on ne le fait pas? Qu'est-ce qu'on a à gagner si on le fait? Qu'est-ce qu'on a à gagner si on ne le fait pas? Et on peut se situer dans l'une ou l'autre de ces cases-là. Là, effectivement, qu'est-ce qu'on a à perdre en empêchant le développement immobilier? Bon, on a la perte de cette espèce-là. Le développement immobilier, on peut le faire ailleurs. Qu'est-ce qu'on a à gagner? Donc, dépendamment de où on se situe et quels sont les intérêts qui sont en jeu, on va avoir des questions qui sont complètement différentes. Donc, on propose une grille d'analyse qui est très carrée pour regarder ces problématiques-là. Mais souvent, il n'y a pas de réponse unique.
Mm-hmm.
Et puis partout, il y a des gens qui vivent avant nous.
Bacteria.
Oui.
Une question avant la précédente. C'était est-ce qu'on a pu étudier les différences des champs du rossignol à Berlin et à la campagne, aux villes, en Allemagne, et ça pourrait dire que les rossignols interagissent, ils modifient leur champ quand ils sont au milieu urbain humain ou quand ils sont dans un milieu, disons, autonome.
Yeah, I mean, some people say they're louder in cities.
Oui,
I think that's probably somewhat true. Sometimes the biggest difference I would find is those that never manage to mate. They keep working on their songs. Mm-hmm. So ironically, the best songs are sung by male birds who are not successful at mating because they keep working on the song. You know, they keep trying. It gets better and better. And that's kind of the opposite of what evolution would suggest, that somehow the best song leads to more mating success. You know, that's how this is supposed to have evolved. But how come these songs get more and more developed by those that do not succeed? It's kind of a paradox. There's also, of course, 2 species of rossignol. And those who experts who are looking at that film, you might have noticed that some of it was shot in Helsinki, where there's a whole different species. That's because it's light all night. It's easier to film. Now, after this year, we've got a lot of footage from Berlin. We won't use all those Helsinki scenes. And we will point out the difference in the song, and that's the Eastern and Nightingale has a more rhythmic, simpler song. And in some very small areas in Poland and Czech Republic and Germany, they overlap and then they mess with each other's songs, which is kind of interesting.
Il pourrait y avoir une sélection de rossignols particulièrement urbains qui s'adaptent à l'homme, ou alors c'est le même rossignol, la même espèce de rossignol qui serait à la en urbain et en urbain.
They're not so different, in my experience, between the city and country so much as these other things, like whether there's, if there's one singing alone and the others have stopped singing, there's more of a difference, rather than in England 2 years ago, there was this only one bird singing. He was the last one who kept singing, and the song was really impressive. In Berlin, the birds will get closer to you, like they'll be right next to you. They don't care. And in England this year, they were a little more reticent and distant, and they also choose spaces which have different acoustic qualities sometimes, and then they stick with the places they've found. So that there's some. I think there's many differences one notices. I don't think it's necessarily that the urban birds, are compromised one way or another. They've gotten used to their space, and they change along the season, different weeks. But people are trying to categorize this and sort of compare. But often a lot of this science has an agenda to prove that noise is bad. They want to show. They really want to come up with something to say that people will notice and pay attention to. And you see in birdsong science a lot of fear of the unknown, the ambiguity. And people don't want to study birds that do amazing things that we can't explain, like the European marsh warbler goes to Africa and copies African birds and comes back to Europe and sings them. That's so different than every other bird that nobody studies it. It's just not studied, whereas the sedge warbler is studied endlessly because the louder and longer songs do have more mating success. So if you're a graduate student, want to study birdsong, your advisor might say, do some more work on the sedge warbler because we like that story, it makes sense. If you say you want to study the marsh warbler, they say, don't go there. We don't know anything about this bird, it's too crazy. It's too confusing. You won't conclude anything. You'll disappear into aesthetic confusion.
Ce qu'on sait, indépendamment de ville versus campagne, c'est que comme chez l'être humain, j'en suis un bon exemple, nous parlons tous les deux français, mais on a des accents différents. Il y a des accents dans les chants des oiseaux aussi, il y a des dialectes dans les chants des oiseaux. Donc quand on va d'une région à l'autre, ils ont des accents, des dialectes, des phrasés qui sont complètement différents et qui ont tendance à se perpétuer dans le temps.
I was interested when the musician you interviewed mentioned that in Berlin, people used to seek out a nightingale to sing for them.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering what were your thoughts about that, and what...
I was trying to find out more about that story the last time. Other people brought it up. It's something that it's this sound that people, they don't usually talk about, but then when they start to get nostalgic about the place and the life, they say like, oh yeah, nightingales are here. I want to hear that bird one more time before I go. And that there's something virtuous about it. And I don't know, how long it goes back or whether, but if I was to think about it, it makes a lot of sense if you know this is something eternal. That I was very surprised and delighted to discover in London by accident there was an exhibit at the Wellcome Trust of these classic items in birdsong studies. Like they had the very first nightingale ever recorded, stuffed, sitting on a gramophone in the museum from 1913. And you could listen to the record, and I was thinking, whoa, this is the same song. It's from 1913. And they also had the book of Athanasius Kircher of transcribed bird songs from 1650. They had these items, which I've heard about for years and never seen. And so it puts you in this whole history. I think people thinking about this song are touching some kind of eternal thing that's much bigger and more ancient than human life, but we can tap into it. Like it's just there.
And so how do you think that your work is continuing this kind of tradition of interacting with animals?
I think people have always been doing it. It's always been going on. Also in the 1700s, there was this book of recorder tunes called The Bird Fancier's Delight. You were supposed to go out and play music with birds, and it's from the birds that we learned our music. And so I think every generation there are people talking about this.
Du point de vue de votre activité artistique, votre travail artistique se situe où exactement? C'est-à-dire c'est un travail de plaisir esthétique pour vous, c'est un travail de prise de conscience pour les autres dans votre activité, c'est un travail de communication interespèces ou autre chose, ou l'ensemble de ces choses, qu'est-ce que...
I mean, when I'm doing this, and also working a lot with scientists, I always bring up the fact that art and science have different criteria for truth. Like I can play one concert together with a bird, and one person can be touched by it, and then it's successful. But I have no idea what actually happened. If I want to prove anything, I would have to do it like 1,000 times and analyze it and demonstrate when I do this, then the bird does this, to make any kinds of conclusion that scientists would be interested in. They just have different ways of deciding something is important. And I think it's often worth bringing that up when you're trying to communicate with scientists who are trying to analyze the same phenomenon in different ways.
Moi, je suis de l'autre côté du spectre, c'est-à-dire plutôt que de travailler en collaboration avec des scientifiques, je suis à la fois l'artiste et le scientifique qui travaillent sur deux projets à la fois. Donc, j'ai pas à essayer de comprendre mes collaborateurs. J'ai déjà ces difficultés à me comprendre moi-même. Et l'intérêt pour moi, c'est d'utiliser le même objet qui doit avoir des vies séparées, que j'appelle des vies parallèles. Donc, je fais de la paradisciplinarité au lieu de faire de l'interdisciplinarité, c'est-à-dire le projet scientifique, vous voyez, j'écris des articles scientifiques avec ça, et j'en fais des expositions aussi. Et pour moi, la troisième partie du triangle, l'art, la science, c'est la sphère publique. Il faut qu'il y ait un intérêt de communiquer quelque chose au public aussi, soit des questions identitaires, qui est habituellement liées à l'essentiel de mon travail, ou aussi des questions environnementales. Donc, c'est art, science et public qui sont les trois côtés de ce triangle. Et c'est ça qui anime mon travail. Des fois, c'est plus scientifique, des fois, c'est plus artistique, mais il y a toujours ce troisième côté-là qui j'ai des comptes à rendre, le public. Sinon, ben, je fais de la science pour mes collègues ou je fais de l'art puis je reste dans mon sous-sol. Donc, c'est à la rencontre du public que la science devient utile, et c'est à la rencontre du public que l'art devient utile aussi. Donc, c'est ça le point commun entre les deux.
Est-ce qu'on pourrait mettre cette vieille étiquette, pour parler en termes un peu anciens, d'art engagé sur votre activité?
Peut-être. Je me considère pas comme un activiste, plutôt comme un pédagogue. Donc, j'ai pas de message unique que je veux livrer au public. Je veux que les gens se posent des questions, sans nécessairement qu'ils soient d'accord avec X, Y, Z, ou même avec ce que j'essaie de proposer. Je ne propose pas une solution. J'essaie de dire, voici les façons dont on peut aborder la question, sans être totalitaire.